Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to New Orleans, Louisiana. Today, I'm going to be hitting you guys with an everything you need to possibly know guide about New Orleans, Louisiana. Before we jump into this, I want to let you guys know that I make videos like this on my channel all the time, and we have guides like everything you need to know guides about so many different locations around the world, plus a bunch to come because I'm actually on a road trip right now across the United States of America, bringing you guys the best possible content of everything you need to know on an amazing road trip across the United States. So make sure that you subscribe with those notifications turned on so you don't miss a single video from this channel. And with that being said, let's jump into everything you need to know about New Orleans, Louisiana. So the way that these guides work is I usually break them up into sub-subjects. So we'll start first of all with location. So location, where is New Orleans, Louisiana located? Well, New Orleans is located at the very bottom, kind of the middle of the state, in the state of Louisiana. It is a city that sits kind of on the river and the bayou, the swampy area of Louisiana in the southern United States of America. This city is very, very historical when it comes to an international community with ties in with Spain, France, and the United States of America, as well as Native American tribes and others that have passed through or have lived in this area before. To visit New Orleans is to visit Louisiana, and to get that feeling, because Louisiana is such a small state, you'll get to encompass all the different sights and sounds that there are to experience in Louisiana, whether it be the Creole people, the swamps and the bayous where you get to take alligator tours, or the craziness of Bourbon Street in Louisiana, New Orleans itself, where you get drunk off your mind and just do crazy stuff. That is what you can kind of get and envision when you're coming to visit New Orleans. Now, as for size, the city is pretty small. It is probably one of the smaller major cities in the United States of America, with everything within the actual major city only being a maybe 30 to 40 minute drive maximum with traffic. Most of the times you can get anywhere you need to go while driving for only 15 minutes. That being said, there are rougher parts to the city when it comes to safety, but most of the city is pretty small and collective, and most of the tourist attractions and sites that you want to see if you're coming as a tourist are located centrally in the city itself. The weather in New Orleans tends to be very, very hot during the summer months and very cold during the winter months, but you can expect random rainstorms and tropical weather from time to time, as well as really, really hot sunstrokes when it comes to the heat waves. As well, the Mississippi River cuts right through New Orleans, which is the largest river in the entirety of the United States of America. A very historical river as well, so there's lots to be learned there as well. So when planning a trip to New Orleans, you're not going to want to miss out on your opportunity to visit the Mississippi River, as well as the location of New Orleans being a very, very diverse area with tons of races and mixtures of people coming in, bringing their languages, their cuisines, their religions, all into one big melting pot of New Orleans, Louisiana. With that being said, let's jump off from location to the cost. What is it going to cost you to visit New Orleans, Louisiana? New Orleans, I would have to say, is probably one of the cheaper major cities in the United States of America, especially when comparing to places like Los Angeles or New York or Miami. Definitely when comparing it to San Francisco. The city is hustling and bustling and sprawling, and it is known for its party and kind of drinking life, so it can get expensive at times if you don't limit yourself, but you can get around there in a budget for sure. You can expect the average meal in New Orleans to cost you something between the $10 to $15 price mark, but the reason I say that it's not as expensive as most other states is because the portion sizes in New Orleans, from what I've tasted, are massive. You will get a lot of food for your bucks. So make sure that you're spending your money right on the right types of foods and the right types of filling meals if you want to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to food. As well as transportation costs tends to be pretty cheap. For accommodation's sake, you can find things for relatively cheap, but we will also jump into that in accommodation. And the main things that you're looking at are like tours and day trips and stuff like that, which will cost you a pretty penny if you take the more expensive high-end ones. There are tours ranging between $30 to $50 and also $50 to $150 and even up to the $300 mark, just depending on the type of stuff you do, whether they're in-city food tours or the swamp bayou tours where you can take airboat rides to see alligators and stuff in the swamps near New Orleans. If you're coming on a vacation, I would budget yourself around $100 to $300 a day if this is for a vacation, kind of expenses paid, but you can, I think, get by on around $50 a day if you really nitpick at prices, and maybe even lower to $30 a day if you're really being a cheapskate, such as I am most of the times. You can subsidize a lot of the tourist attractions in the city to do free stuff like free walking tours or cheaper versions of, let's say, ferries, ferry tour boat rides. You can do them for the public ferries, which are cheaper as well. It is not hard to do it as long as you do a little bit of planning to get the things that you want done. I hope I've broken down costs pretty well. Now let's jump into one of my favorite parts of these everything you need to know guides. Food. What kind of food can you expect to eat in New Orleans, Louisiana? Well, let me tell you right now, the food in New Orleans is some of the most amazing food in the United States. They bring in those spicy Cajun dishes with that awesome Creole flavor and some American classics all blended into one culturally significant place for food. Some top dishes that I want you to think about when you're coming to New Orleans are po' boys. These are sandwiches famous to New Orleans, mostly focusing on chicken po' boys and shrimp po' boys, fried chicken and fried shrimp stuffed into sandwiches with this beautiful soft Louisiana bread. One of the most amazing dishes as well as jambalaya, a beautiful mix of rich tomato saucy, ricey, meaty flavors all come together into this savory dish that's super tasty and pretty cheap if you get it at the right place. As well as gumbo, this is a kind of a seafood mixture that you're going to want to try if you come on down to New Orleans. And of course, for alcoholic beverages, you're going to want to try your New Orleans hand grenade. The New Orleans hand grenade is by far the most famous alcoholic beverage in the city, and it will get you messed up for just around $10, maybe even cheaper if you can find it cheaper in different places. We're going to jump into attractions when it comes to a guide for you to drink on Bourbon Street, but just so you know, if you're in New Orleans and you're going out at night, you got to try the hand grenade. It is a way to get trashy, classy, and have fun at the same time. I think that should cover food pretty well for New Orleans. There's not many crazy options, but there's a lot of variations that you can try. Let's jump right into attractions. What kind of attractions and things do you need to do when you're here in New Orleans, Louisiana? I want to cut in right now in the video and correct myself before this continues going on. Every time that I say the word French district in this video, I mean French Quarter. My bad on that. It is a French Quarter, not district. Go out drinking on Bourbon Street. That is the #1 thing that I have to recommend to you from the city. There's lots of cool attractions and sights to see, and obviously it's a very historical city, but if you want to have fun, if you want to go and party the New Orleans way, you got to give yourself a night on Bourbon Street. At night, it turns alive into this disgustingly amazing, crazy celebration of life and party animals. It's like the Vegas of the East Coast, but only on one street. Bourbon Street at 7 and 8 p.m. daily starts popping with people walking up and down the street, getting wasted off their heads, drinking till they're incapacitated, and throwing jewelry and beads from balconies to other people on the floor, trying to get them to flash you. It is a really fun experience, and there's actually so much to do on the street itself, whether it comes into like a mechanical bull ride, or just listening to live music, or just partying with your friends, trying the different drinks that there are. There's tons and tons of stuff to do, and besides, people there are some of the most talkative and friendly that you can find, I think, across the United States, because everyone's so incapacitated all the time. I should warn you, it is kind of gross, and you'll see people puking in the streets, and you'll see gross smells and disgusting things, but this has just been going on forever because of that French architecture. It's so old. It's there from when the French first settled in the city, and you have these classic French buildings with just people yelling and rocking all around them. It's crazy. I believe there is one time when I was there was actually a person just holding like a $50 bottle of vodka, just spinning in circles, spitting it out on the ground. It is a really funny place. It's a must-do if you're in New Orleans. Do not miss out on the opportunity. Besides going crazy on Bourbon Street, I want you to also look into doing airboat rides or the swamp bayou tours. Similar to the tours you can do in South Florida, where you go visit alligators in the swamps in the Everglades, you can do similar things in the bayou swamps of Louisiana. People will take you out on airboat rides to go experience the swamp, and yes, the swamps are very different, I think, than parts of Texas and Florida, so it is worth its own shot if you've already done them in other parts of the United States. These tours can get kind of pricey, so try to find deals on Groupon and also in streets like Canal Street, which will be our next kind of a tourist attraction. Do not miss Canal Street. Canal Street is kind of the high street of New Orleans. It is kind of, I guess, the Times Square of New Orleans, with big flashy signs, giant hotels, and a lot of theaters and casinos. A walk on Canal Street will always be interesting, with tons of souvenir shops and restaurants to be found. Some of the best restaurants you can eat at are actually found on Canal Street or the surrounding area, so don't miss checking out Canal Street when you're there. As well as the end of Canal Street, you have the Canal Street Ferry Port. This is a place where you can take a ferry that costs you about $2, which will take you to see a whole scenic view of the city. Instead of paying the $30 to $40 to $50 even $70 for a ferry boat tour across the Mississippi River, you can take one for $2 in New Orleans on the Canal Street Ferry Port, and it's super cheap and a super cool way to see the city without spending a lot of money. Now, when you're done with Canal Street, make sure you head on back to the French District. This actually is where Bourbon Street is, but the French District is kind of a world on its own. The French District is the remnants of New Orleans when the French were there. When the French used to rule New Orleans, they built themselves historically French architecture all throughout the city, but the French District is where most of it is located, so you can go there to really take a look at to what kind of colonized France in the United States of America would have looked like. It is a very cool look back in time to French architecture, and some of it sometimes feels like you're just walking through the streets of Paris. It's a really cool experience, and when you're there, do not miss out on trying coffee at Café du Monde. Café du Monde is one of the most famous tourist attractions in New Orleans, period. This is a place where you go try beignets, which are these little sugar powdered donuts, and delicious French coffee. And this coffee is actually special because during the US Civil War, when coffee shortages were short in New Orleans, they actually used cocoa to mix into the coffee to create a new blend of coffee, which is specialized right there in Café du Monde. Now, be warned, there are many coffee places called Café du Monde throughout the city, and I believe some of them are actually franchises of this place, but if you want to visit the original one, it's in the French District, so don't miss it. And that's an in-depth look for you on the French Quarter of New Orleans. As well, if you want to experience a little more French, you can experience that just a city away in Baton Rouge, the capital of Louisiana. But that should be a whole guide in itself one day if I get a chance to really explore that city. Besides that, there's great shopping and souvenir hunting that you can do throughout New Orleans. There's tons of voodoo shops, which are an attraction within their own right, which you can go visit, kind of the voodoo culture of Creole New Orleans, and take a food tour, taste some of that cuisine that we talked about earlier in this video. As well, experience the nightlife. You might even want to do a nightlife tour or a bar hopping tour. I feel like New Orleans could be one of those cities that would be best experienced with a local guiding you through the streets of the city itself. But besides that, I want to hit you guys with the last kind of tourist attraction, which will be Magazine Street. Magazine Street is a street located in New Orleans, which is kind of the hipster neighborhood, up and coming hipster neighborhood of New Orleans. You'll have tons of fancy schmancy restaurants and hipster type clothing shops and old vintage stores and antique shops. It's a cool place to hang out. It's definitely enough to spend a few hours in for a day. You can do record shopping or antique shopping and figure out some cool sights and sounds from this old city. Maybe you can even find some old cool French items that were there from French times when they ruled the city. But I highly recommend checking out Magazine Street because it has some of the best highly rated restaurants in New Orleans right there on that street. And with Magazine Street being covered, that should lock down some tourist attractions for you to do when you're in New Orleans, Louisiana. Don't miss out on those. Let's jump now right into the people of New Orleans. Who can you expect to meet when you're coming to New Orleans, Louisiana? New Orleans has to be one of the best racially integrated cities in the United States of America. It really feels like a utopia of racial diversity, religious diversity, where people don't care about the color of your skin, they don't care about your religion, they don't care about the way you speak or what background you come from. People just accept and love each other. It's a city filled with multiculturalism, and you will meet races of black people, white people, Asians, Indians, Mexicans. It doesn't matter. Everybody comes together in New Orleans and lives and coexists together happily. Some culturally significant people to the city that you want to keep an eye out for are some of the Creole ancestry of the city. These are African Americans that usually came from slaving times who took on that French language and created their own culture down in the bayous of Louisiana. They're one of the most important parts of the city, as well as your white Americans or your classic French that have remained from that city. You'll want to keep an eye out for that cultural diversity and experience those people to the fullest. And I assure you that New Orleans has some of the friendliest people in the United States of America. You'll really get a feeling for that southern hospitality when you're out there. It is super, super fun. Now that we're done with people, I just want to jump into safety very briefly. Now, I feel like a lot of places around the world get a reputation or have a bad rep, and people tend to blow things out of proportion. I just want to put this as a side note in safety. There are parts of New Orleans that are actually dangerous. Yes, there are dangerous neighborhoods, like every city in the United States of America, like every city in the world mostly. There are parts that are a little rougher that you might not want to enter, especially if you're a tourist. I was actually pointed out to by police telling me not to enter specific areas, and some of these specific areas are even close to that Bourbon Street, French Quarter, stuff where tourists do hang out. So you just want to keep an eye out. Do your research on what streets not to enter, when to enter, what times not to go through them, because I know we definitely crossed through some areas that were a little bit scarier. Obviously, we walked out 100% fine, had no issues whatsoever, but you just want to keep an eye out for that when you're there in New Orleans. And with that being said, we are going to finish this everything you need to know guide on the city of New Orleans. This city has a super, super special place in my heart. One of my hands down favorite cities I've been to in the United States, and it'll be about my 4th time going there now as of me filming this guide. You get that classic French look at what it used to look like when French lived in the United States. You get that American quality classic stuff, the foods, the culture, the people, the dancing, the going out. It is super, super fun, and it is a do not miss place if you're coming to the United States of America. If you're coming to New Orleans, do not miss out on New Orleans. So with that being said, let's end this video. I want to remind you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on that notification button so you don't miss a single video from this channel, because once again, I do guides like this all the time in a bunch of different locations around the world, and I'm actually doing a road trip across the United States of America, visiting some of the top sites across the US right now, like the Grand Canyon, Horseshoe Bend, Monument Valley, Los Angeles, San Diego, Tijuana. You're not going to want to miss a single one of these locations, so please subscribe, don't miss them. Also, comment down below a location that you would like me to cover if I do one of these again, and leave me a giant like on this video. Also, if you like my channel and you feel like supporting me, you can check out my merch links down in the description below, pick yourself up some traveling clown merch, or join my Patreon where you can get exclusive rewards, and I will see you guys in the next one. I love you long time, Clats. Goodbye.